The meeting of California High-Speed Rail Authority will come to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Richards.
Here.
Vice Chair Hartnett.
Here.
Mr. Umberg.
Here.
Mr. Rossi.
Here.
Ms. Shank. Ms. Perez Estelano. Here. Mr. Henning.
Here.
Mr. Frank.
Here.
Chairman Richard.
Here. It appears that this auditorium is missing their American flag. So I understand that there is an American flag. There's a picture behind us. Oh, they did. Okay. So will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I want to thank our staff for that impromptu recovery from that. Okay, so we will open with our public comment session. And
Dan, excuse me, Dan, this is Lynn. Did you take roll?
we did, and we will now record you as being here.
I was on the whole time, but I didn't hear me.
Okay, we hear you now, and so you're recorded as being here. Ms. Shank is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at a site that was noticed for the meeting.
And there are no members of the public here.
All right. So we'll go through our public comment period, and we'll start as we do with members of our elected official community, and starting with Fresno Supervisor Henry Perea. Supervisor Perea, welcome and good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. It's great to be here today. It's tougher on Tuesdays because it's usually when our board meets, but today we're off, so it's great being here with you today. But I just want to, again, just bring you Fresno County's warm wishes, very supportive of what we're doing, very pleased with the recent business plan that's been put out. I think it makes a lot of sense. So just asking you to keep moving forward. A lot of progress happening, and we're looking forward to turning dirt in Fresno County, Madera real soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. We appreciate it. Next, we'll have Kevin Dayton, and he'll be followed by Vida Wright.
Kevin Dayton, President and CEO, Labor Issues Solutions in Roseville. I'm here to talk about the business plan that you have put out. My first comment about it is that I think this business plan is pretty much incomprehensible to any ordinary citizen who isn't following this closely. I do understand that you submit this to the legislature and not to the people. However, I'm going to guess that even most of the legislature, especially with term limits, isn't going to really be able to understand this in context. I think it's overly wordy. There are deficient in graphs and charts that might allow people to understand what's going on. Things get really fuzzy once you get into the 2020s, no surprise. But I think it would be better for the board to be frank about the uncertainties and challenges you're facing rather than to put this together, which has a very rosy view. Just looking over it, and I think for somebody to look at this completely, you'd have to spend many hours going through it line by line to figure out everything that's in there. But I saw, for example, on page 14, your yellow initial operating segment appears to go to Santa Clarita rather than Palmdale. I'm a little confused by that because I thought that this was going to be going to Palmdale. Also, I think the people in Santa Clarita are under the impression that you're going to build a tunnel, and they're sort of not paying that much attention right now because they think there are other options. I looked at, you say in there on page 72, 97.5 staff have been hired. I wondered, is that related to 2 months ago when you said you were looking for 175 staff positions and you had 94, which means in only 2 months you've brought in 3.5 people? I point out on page 23 the community benefits agreement. You ought to mention that it's the State Building Construction Trades Council that's signatory to that, and that for that grant through the Fresno County Workforce Investment Board, you got to go through the unions to get training. These are just a few of the many things, and I'm going to be submitting a pretty lengthy analysis of this, but I think the business plan really needs to be redone so that the ordinary voter can understand what you're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Let me point out that we will have a presentation later, and there'll be multiple opportunities for public input on the draft business plan before it is submitted to the legislature, but thank you for your comments. Vida Wright, followed by Robert Allen.
Chairman Richards, distinguished members of the board, good morning. My name is Vida Wright, and I'm the California Region Vice President for the Society of American Military Engineers, commonly known as SAME. SAME is a worldwide organization with 28,000 members, 105 posts around the world, and 1,500 member companies and public agency members. Our members are primarily engineering and construction professionals from private sector, civilian members of the Department of Defense, members of our armed forces from Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, and National Guard. We have 3,000 members in California, and we operate in 7 locations throughout the state in Sacramento, San Francisco, Oxnard, Ventura, Los Angeles, San Diego, Orange County, and Inland Empire. Our members are a strong supporter of the California High-Speed Rail, and we are delighted that we have been accepted to participate in the authority's Business Advisory Council. I'm honored and privileged to be representing SAME in the council. I should also mention that I'm a small business owner and truly appreciate the authority's effort and commitment to creating meaningful opportunities for small business participation in this iconic and transformational project for our state. Finally, I should mention that the California High-Speed Rail project has many supporters. Unfortunately, the supporters are not either as vocal or as organized as they should be. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wright, and I apologize for slightly mispronouncing your first name. I'm sorry. Mr. Allen, good morning. You have a song for us today, Bob?
Morning. No song today.
Wow.
I'm speaking specifically of the Bay Area. However, the concept applies in Southern California as well. Californians in 2008 approved Proposition 1A, the Safe, Reliable, High-Speed Passenger Train Bond Act. High-speed rail needs a secure right-of-way without grade crossings, without public access to its tracks. Blended rail, at least high-speed rail on the Caltrain tracks, would be neither safe nor reliable. What with the Caltrain's many stations and 43 grade crossings. I have proposed an alternate upgrading Amtrak's East Bay route from Santa Clara up to the San Francisco, a new San Francisco Bay Area intermodal rail tub station in Oakland where BART crosses over the railroad track. BART trains run every 4 minutes from there, would reach all 4 downtown San Francisco stations in 6 to 10 minutes. It's sure a lot more frequent and shorter time than the San Francisco airport. This would allow easy extension from the Bay Area rail hub to Sacramento without a new costly Trans-Bay rail crossing. It would also eliminate the need to misuse statewide funds for tunneling in San Francisco and for San Francisco electrification. I urge that you make interim plans for high-speed rail from the Southland, from LA, just to San Jose, the Bay Area's largest city, and at San Jose have cross-platform transfers to Caltrain and the Capital Corridor, that you eliminate any further high-speed rail funding on Caltrain. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next speaker is, I hope I have this right, Virgil Woolfolk, followed by Paul Dyson. Sir, I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
On my notes here, I apologize. The reason I'm here this morning.
I'm sorry, sir. Could you speak in the microphone because we want your remarks to be recorded?
Good morning. The reason I'm here this morning is to speak regarding this item 3 on the agenda. I'm a disabled veteran, minority business, disadvantaged business, service disabled veteran business. When this project was produced or known to the public, as it was me in Fresno, it was told that disabled veterans could be prime contractors on this project. We would never have participated in that role if this had been told to us that this was a scam. We were asked that guy 7 times whether that this was going to actually happen. Dia, I think is his name. He said absolutely. So we bid as a prime. Now, we didn't even get an interview. So I challenged it the first time. So my question to them was, were any of the primes a disabled vet? Were any of the primes a disadvantaged business or minority business? And they wouldn't answer. But they pulled it. This time, I met with Mr. Badia, and he says, Mr. Wolfer, we're going to increase this opportunity for you guys on this project. You'll get a chance. And then they raised this damn thing to $5 million, knowing doggone well we couldn't participate because the bonding insurance was so high that we had to pay auto insurance and workers' comp. For me to play, it was going to be $20,000 right out of the box. We could have done it at $1 million. That was fair. We could have hired veterans and gave other opportunities. I'm the guy who wrote the president who signed the thing yesterday to hire more vets. This doesn't make that happen. And what the worst part is, and I talked to this guy, Mr. Fong. Mr. Fong and Mr. Badia won't even return phone calls. It's unexcusable. This thing needs to be pulled and redone right so small businesses actually have an opportunity. Somas is not a small business. What this happens is that you let these companies put these fringe small businesses that are not really can't do the work, and they give them percentages. Percentages doesn't help. It only gives $1 million to one guy. You got to start changing this so where that dollar is producing a job. Unless you're showing these vets are getting work out of these jobs or other people, it's a failure. You have an integrity problem here. People don't believe this is for real, and all they did is just feed to that. This is a good project. It should work. It's a thing that could help a lot of people. But I tell you, sir, you've got to fix this. You've got to redial this back. Now, Assemblywoman Menendez wrote a letter yesterday. Assemblywoman Cheryl Brown is concerned about it, and other folks are looking at this. They're looking at this. And if this thing goes the way it goes today, you guys are just, this is going to be a mess. Fix this. Hold your staff accountable. Make them do what they say they're going to do. There was 1,100 parcels that were supposed to be on this project when they told us in Fresno. And all of a sudden it dropped to 700. What happened to the other 600? And it took from October to June last year for them to finally put it out. That's a long time. We vets need the work. We need the work. So make it work so we all work, not just the big companies. If you want all of the big companies to do the work, okay, then don't include us. Don't mislead us. Now we can't even get on any of the other teams because we can't get on their teams. The teams have been set. I could have been on all the 4 teams on this job. I actually do surveying. I actually do environmental. We actually were going to met with EDD, and actually we're going to hire vets to go to work on this project. We were the only ones that did. We were ahead of the curve with what the president talked about yesterday. This is a scam if you don't do this right. Your integrity is on the line. The state's opportunity for new opportunities is on the line. And I'm quite sure the governor is going to be really ticked off to find out this is going on. Those are my comments, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, sir. We will have a discussion about this when this item is before us, but I appreciate your comments and concerns. Mr. Dyson, Paul Dyson from RailPAC, followed by Franco Rivera, and then Ted Hart.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Paul Dyson. I'm the president of the Rail Passengers Association of California, also council member for the National Association of Railroad Passengers. I represent probably about 3,000 members of both those organizations who really should be the basis of your support for this project. RailPAC has been around since the late 70s, campaigning for modern passenger railroad services. And our basic philosophy has always been incremental improvements to passenger rail, plus bridging the gap between Bakersfield and Los Angeles, which is the gap in the statewide system. In the mid-2000s, the high-speed rail project started to take form, and we got on board with that. We I guess, changed a little bit from evolutionists to the Big Bang Theory, that we would have this one big project that would solve our passenger rail problems and deliver some useful transportation. And I think the people that voted for that figured that there was a project ready to go. They expected, when they voted for these bonds, to see something happening in pretty short order once that Initiative 1A had been passed. But here we are 6 years later with no transportation delivered, nothing to show for it. And our members, and I think the general public, are getting frustrated and cynical about the whole project. The support is evaporating. And I would say that time is running out on getting something delivered. Now, the possibility of delivering useful transportation from new high-speed rail construction, of course, is very limited. It takes time. But there are other peripheral projects, such as the run-through tracks, the SCRIP project in Los Angeles, and some other projects for connections to future high-speed rail that could be accelerated and could be delivered. And you really need to take up the propaganda war and say that these projects are on the way and these benefits will be delivered. Otherwise, you'll just lose the rest of the support that you have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Frank Oliveira, followed by Ted Hart, followed by David Schonberg.
Frank Oliveira. I'm with Citizens for California High-Speed Rail Accountability. I've spoke before you many times. Okay, I'm going to talk about some very specific things pertaining to the business plan, okay, and other documents and meetings that I've been to. One of the things that is referenced in the documents I'm reading is that the public comment pertaining to the business plan is going to be summarized for the board. Okay, who's going to do the summarizing? And is that appropriate? Because that's in a document. So if I make a comment to the board, is the board going to read it? Or will it be summarized, kind of categorized, you know, yay or nay type thing? That's a little bit confusing. Another question is about the ICS or the FCS or the initial construction section or whatever we want to call it. At one time, that was from Merced to Bakersfield, I believe. Then it changed from Madeira to Bakersfield. Then it was from Madeira to just north of Bakersfield. Now I'm at meetings listening, and it's 1 mile north of Kern County. So is the ICS or the FCS, is it really from Madeira to the middle of nowhere, between Corcoran and Wasco somewhere? Is that a usable segment? Is there independent utility by doing that? Is that the fact? Because if that's the fact, it would be good in public outreach if that was communicated that this is where we're going, and we drop the Bakersfield conversation. Next issue is the Hanford Station, or the Kings Tulare Regional Station. I believe it was Station 25 out of 24 authorized stations. Is the Hanford Station really going to be built? If it's going to be built, who's going to pay for it? Will it be paid for by the cities, the county, or the state? Who will do that? That's a confusing matter in the community right now, and I think it's an important matter so people understand what is at stake here. Lastly, I don't see where you've included the costs of running this rail alignment along 10 miles of high voltage transmission lines. Based on what I'm looking into, it appears that that's going to add another 5 to 10 years to your project and another $500 million to $1 billion to your project. There's no reference to that in any of your planning documents. But that's a big thing, and your staff have known about it for 3 years. So why isn't that being conveyed in your dollars and cents in your business plan? Because that is part of the ICS. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Oliveira. And when we have the staff presentation today, I'll ask specifically about the public comment questions, and we'll make sure these others are addressed. Mr. Hart, good morning.
Yes, good morning. I've been in front of the board a good number of times. I want to address a couple of issues on the new business plan. which obviously is going to take us quite a while to go through that and study it in more detail. First off, I have brought to the board before the voter I furnished to the board, and I know you already have all those on the voter information guide, but I would like to reference that. There is a $9.95 billion in bonds to be issued for the clean, efficient, high-speed train service linking Southern California, Sacramento, San Joaquin Valley, and the Bay Area. And the analysis, and this is where it becomes important, the analysis by the legislative analyst is, quote, the entire high-speed train system would be about $45 billion. Note the word entire, and this is the point that I've tried to make over and over again. That means the entire state consisting of 800 miles of track. It does not mean just phase one consisting of 520 miles. This takes us to the business plan, and in the 2012 business plan, in Exhibit 3-5, the cost to construct phase one blended has two columns. Again, on the 2012, you have a high-cost option and a low-cost option. Your high-cost option is 17% higher than the low-cost. In the 2014 business plan, the same exhibit, except there is no high-cost option column. Why is that? Why the change? Is there something that's missing here? It's just like it disappeared. Back to the 2012, the low-cost option for phase one was $53.4 billion. The high cost was $62.3 billion. And the year of expenditure dollars that has been advertised over and over again, total cost for phase one, $68 billion. All of these numbers conveniently avoid the cost for the entire statewide system consisting of the 800 miles, which is the only thing the taxpayer voters were ever given in the voter guide. There's no description of anything other than 800 miles, and yet everything's been focused on 520 miles. So, since the 2014 business plan does not provide a total cost for the entire system, we're left to our own to establish what these costs might be, which is pretty easy to do. You take 520 miles of track for $67.6 billion, and that equates to $130 million per mile. And then you just go ahead and take and multiply that times 280 miles, which equates to $36.4 billion. Add that to the other, and you now have a total cost of the entire system of $104 billion. Now, if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to use those numbers, then I suggest that you put something in the business plan to tell us how much is this project going to cost for the entire system. So why have all of this has been left out? Could it be that you had a really good thing going with the media, with the $68 billion, which has been the advertised number, and if I were in your position, I would like it also, because the total cost for the entire project just got lost somewhere along the line. So rather than take any more time at this time, I would hope, Mr. Morales, that you would be able to answer these questions during your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. David Schonbrun.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. David Schonbrun, Transdev. My preference would be to offer my comments after the presentation.
Mr. Schonbrun, I'm sorry, but we have traditionally had all of the public comments prior to items on the agenda.
That's taking things out of context. I'm here today to announce to the world that the emperor has no clothes. While there's new information in this plan, it's only a distraction because the plan offers no way to move the project forward. This document can't possibly be considered a business plan since it offers no concrete details on how you will fill a $21 billion hole. As it currently stands, your so-called business plan is essentially a bolo. Be on the lookout for a leprechaun with a pot of gold. Without a dramatic infusion of money, you don't have a project, and you certainly don't have a business. Without that dramatic infusion of money, this is not high-speed rail. It's a downtown Fresno improvement project. The problem here is that you think you're building another BART extension when you're actually building a business. That's something that political institutions like yours have no demonstrated temperament or competence to pull off. Transdev has a proposal on its website, transdev.org, for changing the direction of this project. It's based on the state rail plan and on the Senate's Plan B from 2012. If you were to move fast enough to get voter authorization for modifications to the bond measure, it is conceivable that the federal grants could be put to use in a way that gives direct benefits to many millions of Californians. The draft plan doesn't contain any alternative public-private development strategies for the implementation of Phase 1 as required by 1029. While the plan does lay out its proposed public-private development strategy, that doesn't meet any reasonable interpretation of alternatives. You might wonder what I mean by that. The authority has already received at least one example of an alternative. The French National Railway, SNCF, proposed that the authority conduct an RFP process leading to a pre-development agreement where a private sector entity would lead the development of the project. To meet the requirements of 1029, Transdev believes you need to discuss the proposal that SNCF made to you. Interestingly, the plan notes on page 54 the cost savings that can come from private sector involvement, yet doesn't mention the possibility of bringing in a private partner before starting construction. As to the consistent claim your agency has made that there is no interest in investing at the beginning of this project, it's important to note the context. Nobody was interested in investing in the route this board approved. If you were to allow bidders to select their own routes, I have reason to believe there would be investment interest at the beginning. Thank you for considering these comments.
Thank you, Mr. Shedler. Next, Ms. Jillian Means of Fresno.
Good morning. Before I introduce my special guest, I want to tell you a quick little story, a small world story. I was invited by the state of Punjab in India to come talk about the wonders of Fresno County, which of course I did. And in one of the speeches, there was about 250 entrepreneurs and business owners in the room in Chandigarh, India. And I was talking about all the things that Fresno County has to offer and the opportunities we have. And of course, I talked about high-speed rail and what was starting there. After the meeting, I had a line of people that came up to talk about how they would like to do business with us in Fresno County. And this one gentleman came up to me and he said, "Oh, you're working on the high-speed rail thing in California?" And I said, "Oh, here in Fresno County, it's starting." And he said, "I happen to own some property on what's called the Chowchilla Y. Could you be able to help me with that?" And here I was in India. So it's everywhere. We can't get away from it. But obviously, I've been talking many years about the importance of this project to generations to come. And one of those is my grandchildren. I know I've talked many times about my grandchildren. This happens to be one of my grandchildren, Jillian Means. She's 8 years old. When she was 4, she came into my office at the EDC and she drew a huge picture of what she thought the high-speed rail was going to look like. She had the train, she had the background, She had what was going to build up around the high-speed rail. That is still on my wall, so if you ever come to Fresno, please come and look at Jillian's artwork. But I thought it was important at this time for her to tell you, and she wrote her speech herself, no help from Nana, for her to come and tell you why she thinks this is important to her. So this is my granddaughter, Jillian.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Hi, my name is Jillian Means, and I am here to tell you about how the high-speed train can help. I moved away from a lot of family and friends this summer, and it's really hard to visit them because there's so much traffic in the road. And sometimes we just sit there for 20 minutes, which is boring. And my family and friends already live 6 hours away. But if you're on the high-speed train, it will only take about 2. And also, less cars on the road means less pollution in the air. The high-speed train makes it 10 times easier to get to faraway places, like one of my favorite places, Disneyland. Some kids have never even been to Disneyland because it's so far away. Well, if you're on the high-speed train, it'll only take about an hour instead of like maybe 5, 4, I don't know. When the high-speed train is finished, I will be in college, and my Nana can visit me a lot, bringing me treats. And that's why I think the high-speed rail is a very important project, and it can help change a lot of problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think that the high-speed rail will only be able to bring your Nana to visit you if we build it to Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts, because that's clearly where you're headed. Thank you, Ms. Means. Next is Marvin Dean, followed by our last speaker, John Barna.
Good evening. Good morning. I wasn't going to speak, but I'm here.
Hold on one second, Mr. Dean. Can you just pull the microphone closer? I want to make sure that we're picking up your comments.
Yes.
Thank you.
I said I'm here representing the current supporters for high-speed rail. I initially wasn't going to speak today, but I felt I should come and say a few things since I wasn't here at the last meeting. And that is really, two things that were said today that I want to echo on. One is the last speaker, the young lady, because I really think that if we do not build this high-speed rail, then the generation and her generation that's really going to be the big beneficiary of this project is going to be a missed opportunity. And people say, why now or wait for the future? I'm going to make one case why now. The cost of money right now, bond financing and also financing right now is probably going to be the lowest we're going to ever see in a long time. And so the longer we wait, if the interest rates goes up, it's going to cost us a lot more than what it would build this thing out today. And I would also echo somebody that spoke earlier that said that those supporters of the high-speed rail project do not say a lot. And I would put a challenge out to those of us that support the project. We need to be very vocal in letting the communities in which we live in that we support this project and tell the story why we support it. And I would hope to those that are opposed to the high-speed rail project, find a way to see if we can bridge our differences and work with this board. And because this project is going to be good for the entire state, all of us, and our children to come. And our children are going to look back at us when she gets to a point, the young lady that spoke a minute ago, and get to be our age, and we have missed this opportunity. And the mess that we're going to have to move people from one end of the state to the next, they're going to wish why that our leaders didn't do a better job when they had a chance to. So again, I would just challenge everybody, and I would say to the board, I know that you guys have got your hands full with some of the things, the challenge you're going to have to pull this project together. So I would just encourage you to stay the course, because some of us appreciate what you're doing. And I think you have a good staff in place, a good board in place. And I think we put our heads together, we can bring this project together for the state and benefit all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Our last speaker is John Barna.
Chairman and members, I'm John Barna with AECOM, but representing the Association for California High-Speed Trains today. I want to speak to item number 5 and commend staff on a well-done business plan. They seem to get better and better, and in particular want to point out that the application of risk management is a big plus to this plan, and also the peer review work that's gone into the inputs is a strong positive, especially as it goes to the legislature. And ACHST is also pleased that the governor is proposing the possibility of ongoing funding through cap and trade for this effort. That is going to be a game changer for the private sector. And there have been a couple of comments today about bringing in the private sector. We've long said that having a stable, ongoing revenue source was critical. It wasn't just critical because we were looking for those funds to pay for the private sector. What it does is it represents a long-term commitment by a reliable public sector partner. And that's what the private sector needs, is a long-term, reliable public sector partner. We think this business plan is a big step forward toward that. And Keith Dunn, our executive director, will clearly be taking this message to the Capitol as budget subcommittees and policy committees review the business plan and the governor's proposal. So in sum, I just want to congratulate staff for getting to this point, and we look forward to working with you to secure the necessary resources to make that private sector investment a key part of the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barna. Thank all our commenters this morning. That concludes the public comment portion of the agenda. We'll now move to the regular order of the agenda. The first item is the approval of the board minutes from the January 14th, 2014 meeting.
Move approval.
Second. Okay, it's been moved by Vice Chair Hartnett, seconded by Mr. Rossi. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Richards.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hartnett.
Yes.
Mr. Umberg. Aye. Mr. Rossi.
Aye.
Ms. Shank. Ms. Perez Estelano.
Yes.
Mr. Henning.
Aye.
Mr. Frank.
Abstain.
Chairman Richard.
I'm aye. Lynn Shank, can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so,
Can you hear me?
all right, we will record your vote as aye on the minutes. Okay? No, that's, we apologize out here for that. Okay, so the minutes are approved. Next item is item number 3, the award of right-of-way engineering and survey support services contracts. Ms. Gomez.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I am here to request approval for the award of 5 contracts related to right-of-way engineering and survey support services. The total value of the services required is not to exceed an amount of $16 million over a 4-year period. Back in December of 2013, the board approved the Resolution 1333, which allowed us to issue a request for qualifications to obtain statements of qualifications from qualified entities to provide those services. Delivery of the first construction segment in the Central Valley will require the acquisition of an excess of 1,000 parcels of real property. In order for us to effectively acquire the right-of-way, it is necessary to obtain the personnel and the expertise of external providers. Multiple contracts will be required to carry out this critical work. The scope of the services to be contracted for include administration project management, progress reports, including final reports, information, and project tracking systems. The technical services, which is the bulk of the work, include boundary maps, monumentation maps, survey control maps, records of survey, lot line adjustments, subdivision maps, legal descriptions, parcel maps, appraisal maps, certificates of compliance, and staking and marking of the parcels. The procurement process for these contracts was managed directly by the authority staff, consistent with the state's competitive architectural and engineering procurement process. 14 proposals were received and evaluated by the team in accordance with our regulations and procedures. Interviews and discussions were held with the teams on January of this year to further the evaluation process and serve as a basis for ranking the top proposers. The staff is recommending board approval to finalize negotiations and execute contracts with 5 teams in the amount not to exceed $3.2 million for a term of 4 years. The firms are Odell Engineering, Chaudhry and Associates Incorporated, Quadnop Incorporated, Mark Thomas and Company Incorporated, Hernandez Kroon and Associates Incorporated. All 5 teams were composed of experienced engineering and licensed surveying firms. 4 of the teams are 100% small business. For all 5 teams, the primary offices under the contracts will be based in Fresno, Tulare, or Kings County. The contracts that will be issued will include the board's adopted 30% participation goal under the revised Small and Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program for professional service contracts.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez. I have a lot of respect for the staff and for your work in particular, but I am concerned about the comments that Mr. Woolfolk made this morning. Let me turn to our CEO and ask if he could address those.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. The procurement that we're presenting was conducted with an RFQ through a competitive process, as Ms. Gomez detailed. We take very seriously, and as we've reported to the board on other occasions, the board policy and the goal of attaining 30% small business participation, and included within that the 3% disabled veteran business participation, and do a lot of outreach to try to make sure that firms who are qualified are participating in the program and able to compete. And where possible, we try to structure the contracts to make it, to maximize those opportunities for competition. I think the results here speak to that. 4 of the 5 firms are in fact small businesses. With regard to the particular concerns, I've been made aware of those. I can assure you we will follow up with Mr. Woolfolk, see if there are opportunities to help him with the firms that have been selected, but also to ensure that his concerns are addressed forward. We can do what we can to try to help make him as competitive as possible going forward to win contracts. It is a competitive process. We had 12 firms. There's an objective ranking that happens with 5 panels who look at that, not all of whom are authority staff as well. So in any contract, we're going to have firms who are successful and some who are not, and we're going to do everything we can to provide additional opportunities for firms to continue to compete.
Okay, I appreciate those remarks, and I guess I would just add to the extent that he was indicating that there might have been some misunderstanding about the scope of being prime or sub. I'd really like to ask the staff to reach out and make certain that we're particularly diligent about helping to communicate these things, and my comments there do not suggest that the staff was not. I want to be clear about that, but given a project of this magnitude, we always want to meet that standard. So I think that would be good for the staff to continue to work with this gentleman and see what opportunities are there. Comments or questions from other board members? I'm sorry, yes. I didn't see who was first, but Mr. Ingram.
One question. I understand there were 12 entities that were considered, 5 selected. Was there a preconceived notion that we would choose 5, or how did we arrive at 5?
We determined, well, we were in the resolution, we said we would award between 4 and 6, and so we broke it down based on the amount of work and determined that 5 would be adequate to meet the needs that we currently have for that section.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, that is what we're, in a case like this, what we're trying to do is strike a balance between spreading out the work, but also then having it manageable and allowing for efficiencies and cost efficiencies on their side as well as ours. So, we theoretically could have done this all with one contract, or we could have had 10. In the middle is what we think strikes that balance.
Ms. Perez-Estolano?
Yes, I just have a question about the range of each of the contracts being about 3 to 4 million each, 3.2 each. Is that what you're?
Yeah, each one is 3.2 million.
Right.
Up to 3.2 million.
So the question I have is for a small business to receive the kind of insurance coverage for that kind of contract is high for a small business. And so just hearing the comments earlier and having my own small business and understanding what it means to have that kind of coverage would mean that prime or sub even would have to go and get that kind of coverage to actually receive the contract. And so my question is, was there thinking in terms of breaking it down to different levels? For example, a firm that was larger be able to take maybe 5 or 6 million of the work and then at least add an entry level point, maybe lower. I agree with our chair. I don't want to micromanage here. I just want to understand how we gave access to different size firms.
Out of the 14 proposals that we submitted, more than half were 100% small business. And so in interviewing with them, we thought that if we would have went down to just 4, that would have been a higher amount. And so we determined that the 5 with the 3.2 million was doable for the small businesses that we selected. So we did have a considerable amount of them 100% small business that submitted the original proposals.
Just one final question, Mr. Chair.
Of course.
So what's the order of magnitude of insurance? I assume they need a bond, is that right?
That's correct.
A bond plus all the other general liability, et cetera, insurance. What would one of these entities need to put out initially before they even begin work or get a single paycheck? What kind of money are we talking about?
I don't have that amount, but we can get that to you. I don't have it.
I'm just trying to figure out upfront what the upfront cost is for a small business. So, okay, thank you.
It should be generally somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5% to 2% of the contract amount.
30 to 40,000. All right.
Pleasure of the board on this.
I would move for approval, Mr. Chair, and I'm satisfied with the process. I'm also very satisfied with what our CEO committed a moment ago with regards to trying to help those firms who were not successful to work towards helping them be successful in the future.
Okay. Second. It's been moved by Vice Chair Richards and seconded by Vice Chair Hartnett. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Richards.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hartnett.
Yes.
Mr. Umberg.
Yes.
Mr. Rossi.
Yes.
Ms. Shank.
Yes.
Ms. Perez-Estolano.
Yes.
Mr. Henning.
Yes.
Mr. Frank.
Yes.
Chairman Richard.
Yes. Mr. Woolfolk, I know that this was probably disappointing to you, but I think our staff is sincere in wanting to continue to look for opportunities for you and others to participate in this project. So, sir, Mr. Woolfolk, I All right. Thank you, sir. We will follow up on this. The next item is item 4, which is the Finance and Audit Committee update and presentation of financial reports by the executive staff. I'm going to ask Mr. Rossi, who's the chair of the Finance and Audit Committee, to lead us through this. I'd just like to make one preparatory remark, is that we did set up this committee 2 years ago to help this organization deal with both some negative audit reports and also the need to create modern, transparent financial reporting system as we move into the delivery of this major project. So in turning this over to Mr. Rossi, I just want to express my thanks to him and to Tom Richards, the second member of this, for what I know was a lot of work. And Mr. Fong, you're going to get the craw to Rossi for the staff work for putting up with all this. But, Mr. Rossi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was walking over here this morning from my parking space, I've never been to this end of the Capitol, and I didn't realize that the Department of Education was just across the street. And as I was walking by, I saw out of the corner of my eye a quote that was on the wall. And the quote is, I believe this is pretty close. All I ever wanted to learn were the secrets of heaven and earth. That's what audit committees do. And as my colleague, Mr. Richards, said, and hopefully understand what they mean. And so what we have done, and I know it's got a lot of interest in a number of parties as to what it is we do. Well, what we do is advise and recommend to the staff what we think would be the information we need and the formatting that we need as board members to execute our fiduciary role in governance. There are several things that you do in order to make that happen in the standard Finance and Audit Committee. You have to get, first you have to be sure there are policies and procedures, and you audit to see that those policies and procedures are followed. And if they aren't, you then set up follow-ups to be sure that there are mitigation roles put in place and that they're done efficiently and quickly. You manage the concept of the importance of the priorities of those risks to the overall success of the venture. You want to do this in a way that is easy to review, so the reports you get people can read and understand, because we have a number of constituencies who look at these reports, so they have to be user-friendly. And probably the two most important things Finance and Audit can do is put in place strong early warning systems. And you'll see in the presentations today we have attempted to do that, and I would say that we've been reasonably successful. And in a large project of this nature, a turnkey project, an infrastructure project, you want to watch for the migration of risk. And by that I mean at the beginning of a project, you will have one set of risks, a set of priorities, and as you go through the project, those risk priorities change, new risks occur, you deal with those, and you move to completion. So at the end of the day, what we're looking for is early warning, immediate response to that early warning. You want an audit trail so you know what was done, how it was done, who did it. And you want to be sure that you are managing your risks over time, dealing with not only the risks that you have of looking at the set of numbers, but looking at how that changes the probabilistic opportunities for problems to occur. We have been working for some time to get to a place where we have these reports, and they are, you all have them, they're all on the website. Russ and as our CFO will take you through the financial part. Our auditor will take you through the auditing piece of that action. Scott will take you through the project aspect, and John will take you through the risk management piece. And as you listen to these presentations, what you will see is how they all tie together from the perspective of early warning, understanding what we're doing, how we're addressing issues. And I think it's really important. You know, there are a lot of reasons for doing audit. but probably the only honest-to-God reason for doing audit is that regardless of what it is, the project that's being done or the business being run, they're all being done or run by people. We all make mistakes. The world changes, things change, and the audit process, early warning mechanisms are to ensure that we find these as soon as possible so that we can address them as soon as possible and minimize the risks to the overall project and its costs. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm turning it over to Russ, our CFO.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rossi. And just as we do, Mr. Rossi, it's my understanding that today you're unveiling the product of the committee's work to develop these financial and risk reporting systems, but that you intend this to be a regular update mechanism for the board and the public. Is that correct?
Actually, we had an open session today, and I assume we'll continue to do that, and we will make this presentation quarterly to the board, or more often if appropriate.
Thank you. Morning, Mr. Fong.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, fellow board
Before
members.
you start, Ms. Schenk, if you can hear me, we're picking up some noise, so maybe if it's possible to mute your microphone, that'd be great.
I will do that.
Thank
Good morning, Russ Fong, Chief Financial Officer for the High Speed Rail. Today I'd like to go over a few items. First, the Finance and Audit Committee reports. You can take a look at the handout, the PowerPoint in front of you. Also talk about a high-level overview of our CFO and the financial office. Walk through our financial reports, our audit plan for fiscal year 13-14. A little update on our construction package 1 project update, and a brief overview of our risk update. Let's start with a little bit of a background. I joined the High Speed Rail last spring. At that time, we had 9 staff, and that was in accounting, procurements, budgets, and contracts. Department of General Services was our financial services, and as of last December, we transitioned that over to the High Speed Rail. Today, we've actually transitioned all the functions. In January was the first month we actually produced all our financials. We've created a new financial office going from 9 staff to 36. We currently have 6 vacancies. These vacancies are all newly created for this year. We introduced mid-middle managers, developed various policies and procedures, and implemented some internal controls. Some challenges that do lie ahead. The average length of employment for our fiscal staff is 9 months. We will experience some growing pains. January, as I said, was our first month we actually produced our financial reports and financial transactions. There's going to be a learning curve. We have no financial system, and this is important because we need the following. We do need a single source of financial data, less reliance on manual Excel spreadsheets, ability to track the color of money. And let me give you an example. Here's a breakup of our current authorities appropriation. For Prop 1A, we have $2.6 billion for constructions, $1.1 billion for our blended system, $477 million for planning, for a total of $4.2 billion. Switching over to the federal funds, we have ARA funds of $2.2 billion, FY10 funds of $928 million, for a total of $3.1 billion. We also have local funds of $52 million, some reimbursements, and eventually we'll have some private sector funding. We need to track our aged receivables. We need better processes for projections and forecasts, more efficient and effective reports, produce investment-grade reporting, and we need a financial system that thinks. To me, in my opinion, this is a must-have. So let's take a look at slide 2. Let's start with an overview of my role as a CFO in our newly created financial office. So what drives my team on a daily basis? It's to ensure our financial integrity and enhance our internal controls. So how do we accomplish this? For the past few months, a financial office staff has met collaboratively with our program and administrative areas, and we defined and examined and expanded functions and processes that will benefit the authority in the following ways. Creating a higher level of financial transparency, improving the precision of our enterprise cash management process to ensure financial stability, creating timely and accurate monthly financial reports to improve our internal and external financial reporting, improved our reconciliation process and expense reporting to fully understand the cost of doing business, and focused on developing better controls and analysis of our financial data on a monthly and quarterly basis. So let's take a look at my CFO agenda. There are 4 key areas of focus that I have. Number 1 is financial risk and compliance. The question we need to ask is how are we going to look in the future? Currently, as a government agency, we're under GASB, which is the Government Accounting Standards Board. With investments in the private sector coming down the line, should we be FASB? That's our Financial Accounting Standard Boards. These are accounting standards that are comparable to the private sector. Sarbanes-Oxley, should that play a role? Should we use some of their best practices? Number 2 is our core functions and back office. Like I said earlier, we bought our financial services in-house, and effective January 1st, it's running fine. We've upgraded our accounting and contracts procurement and budget staff from 9 to 36. We developed and implemented internal policies and procedures to enhance our internal controls, and we implemented checks and balances to ensure our financial integrity. Number 3 is growth and performance. We want to track performance. We want to develop management reports, that will track performance, aid in the decision-making process, and increase transparency. Finally, executive board and stakeholders. Provide financial information for transparency and oversight, and develop financial reports to allow the board to uphold their fiduciary responsibilities. The Finance and Audit Committee is made up in these 4 areas: financial reporting, audits, risk update, and project update. So let's take a look at the first one, our summary of financial reporting. The key focuses are these areas here: the summary of financials, invoice payments, administrative budget, capital outlay budget, total expenditures and forecasts, contracts, procurements, and projects and initiatives. Listed below each category is the corresponding reports. Let's take a look at each report on slide 6. At this point, it might be good to turn to your handouts of the actual financial reports. It might be a little easier to follow. The first report is a summary highlighting 3 critical areas. If you only want to read one report, this is the report to read. It captures the invoice payments on the top 2 charts, the state administrative budget, the middle charts, and finally below the capital outlay budget. This report is designed to give the reader a high-level snapshot of our 3 critical areas. The details will be in the actual reports to follow. Let's take a look at each chart as we go forward. And the first 2, invoice payments. This is one of our priorities, is to make sure we're paying our invoices in a timely manner. This chart right here reflects both month-to-month comparison. This particular report in front of you is comparing our January reported numbers versus our February numbers. The pie chart on the right reflects the actual percentage breakout of each age receivable. The middle 2 charts is our administrative budget. The left side compares our expenditures with our budget by functions. Functions are the administration, executive office, external affairs, financial office, legal, and program management. The red bar represents year-to-date expenditures and compared to the blue lines, which represent year-to-date budget. The bar chart on the right compares expenditures versus budget by the program. Administration is program 10. Program management oversight is program 20. Public information communication is program 30, and fiscal and other internal controls contracts is program 40. This particular report ends on December 31st, which represents 50% of the budget year. We compare these expenditure percentages by this 50%. Finally, on the bottom 2 charts is our capital outlay chart. This highlights the 13-14 capital outlay budget. The bar chart on the left displays the outlay budget for planning, both in federal and Prop 1A funds. The bar chart on the right expresses our construction, both in federal and Prop 1A bonds. I'd ask the board to turn over to your reports, the accounts ageable reports, easier to see. This report tracks all age receivables over 45 days and puts them in categories of 1 to 30 days, 31 to 60, 61 to 90, 91 to 20, 21 to 1 year, and greater than 1 year. Vendors on this report are listed in the following categories: regional consultants, project management team, construction and right-of-way, third-party resource agencies, and administration and support. The top section reflects the balance over 45 days. The bottom section reflects our age balance once the Federal Railroad Administration, the FRA, approves all pending drawdown requests. The relatively high January age balance is due to the following. If you remember back in December, we had the federal shutdown for 2.5 weeks. Right after the feds came back, there was a Delphi, is a federal system for download, went down for maintenance for 2 weeks. And then again, we had our DGS transition from DGS to bringing our functions in-house. Slide 11, cash management report. The top portion reflects our cash in. So this is current balances plus any anticipated cash deposits. Cash out, there are items that we anticipate paying with Prop 1A funds within the next 90 days. So this is our priority list of items that require Prop 1A cash for payment. The cash in bottom section is our future deposits pending FRA approval and or DGS reconciliations as we close the year. Moving on to the summary of monthly budget expenditure report on slide 12. This report measures the program's year-to-date expenditures with its budget. This report becomes more meaningful in the third and fourth quarter towards the end of the year. Our expenditures, as you can see on this report, is 27% at the 50% mark of the year. We spent $7 million of our total $26 million budget so far. Program 20 reflects the program management oversight reflects 100%. Program management oversight function was brought in-house this year. Part of the state staff has taken, part of the 106 positions we received this year are state staff and will oversee the project oversight, which is why the budget is relatively small. It's somewhat typical for a state agency to have a low percentage in the beginning of the budget year. Slide 13 is our executive budget summary. This report reflects 3 parts. Part 1, pages 1 through 7, gives a high-level view of our year-to-date expenditures versus budget by functional area. On page 1, you'll see from left to right categories: total budget, prior month expenditures, year-to-date expenditures, total remaining budget, year-to-date percentage of budget expenditures, the forecast, and our year-to-date expenditures plus our forecast. We forecast today spending about $23 million of our $26 million admin budget, or 87%. Our forecasted spending is less due to salary savings. With our early hiring challenges, we have not spent our entire salary and savings budget. The good news going forward is we have mitigated most of these hiring challenges. Hiring exams have been completed. We are transitioning our HR functions from DGS to Caltrans, which has a strong understanding of our HR needs. We currently filled 50 positions. An additional 11 positions have hiring dates, and 17 more positions are projected to be filled in the next 2 months. This gives us a total of 75 of the 106.5 newly established positions for fiscal year 13-14. Moving on to slide 14, this is part 2 of the executive budget summary, and that's represented on page 8 through 14. This displays our expenditures versus budget by line item and function. This section of the report goes into more detail. It's important to note that this is our first year. We divided up our budget into this format. Once we have some historical data, be more precise next year in distributing our budget within each line item. Again, we have spent 27% of our budget at the 50% mark. Part 3, pages 15 through 21 of our executive budget summary. This section displays our administrative budget by positions and functions. The categories from left to right are total positions authorized, our Budget Act dollars, total vacant positions, our vacancy rate, and year-to-date expenditures. Moving on to our capital outlay budget summary. First, I wanted to say originally on Monday, the wrong version of this report was put on our website. I do apologize for that. The version that you have today in front of your, on the desk, and the public's version and the version on our website is current. So I do apologize for that mishap. This report is consistent with our funding contribution plan with the FRA. Let's take a look at page 1. It highlights our capital outlay budget by current year 13-14 on the top half of the page. And on the bottom half would be the program to date. It's broken out by the following: planning, which is on page 2, which was established in 2006, includes bond funding Prop 1A, federal trust fund, ARA funds only. Construction, established in July 1st of 2012, and this includes bond fund Prop 1A and also federal trust funds, ARA and FY10 funds. Pages 2 through 5 are broken out in sections. Each section has a separate environmental clearance. Page 6 details Prop 1A bond funds, and the following page 7 details the federal trust funds, including ARA and FY10. Slide 17 is our total project expenditures with forecasts. As you can see, the top category lists all the project management team costs and regional consultant costs for the fiscal year. We include forecasts in italics in the right columns. The second category lists our administrative expenses by fiscal year. The bottom green line highlights our total expenditures by fiscal year. At the end of 2013, we spent $450 million in state funds, $176 million in federal funds, for a total of $626 million. The authority started spending state fund resources back in 1996 through the Public Transportation Act, or account, and various other state resources. In 2009, we started selling Prop 1A bonds. In 2010, we received federal funds, and as of December 31st, 2013, we have spent $176 million worth. Of the $450 million in state funds, $95 million has been used as an eligible federal grant match. Moving on to slide 18, which is our contracts and expenditures report. This report lists all active contracts and procurements in alphabetical order. The green font represents changes from the previous month's report. If we start from the far left column, it lists the vendor's or contractor's name, small business percentage, if any, the contract name, the encumbered amount year to date, actual expenditures, the balance, which is the contract amount minus the actual expenditures, and description of the service. The very bottom of the report lists all the totals. Resolution 1214, approved in September of 2012, gave the CEO certain procurement authority, but stipulated that a list of all new and amended authority contracts with a value of $10,000 or more be periodically presented to the board by authority staff. Going forward, the contracts and expenditure report will satisfy this requirement. On slide 19 is our projects and initiative report. This report highlights some important projects and initiatives going on within the organization. Once a project or initiative is completed, it will show as completed for 1 month and then deleted from this report. How to read this report? The name of the project initiative is on the left-hand side, the division owner, upcoming milestones, the start date, end date, timeline, rating, and trend, and budget rating and trend. The timeline and budget will have the following ratings. Green for satisfactory, meaning no corrective action. Yellow for caution, need corrective action soon. And red for escalate, immediate corrective action required. The timeline and budget will also have a trend. Sideways arrows mean no change from last month's report. Upward arrow means an increase, and a downward arrow means a decrease. We should focus on the projects and initiatives that are red and those that are yellow with an upward trend. Let's focus on 2 projects on this report. One with the rating of red and one with the rating of yellow, but with an upward trend. The red, the financial system. As I stated earlier, we need to obtain approval from the California Technology Agency and Department of Finance, the fiscal unit. There's been a delay in our procurement and implementation of the financial system due to development and submittal of the feasibility study report required by the control agencies. We are trying to mitigate this issue by putting more staff on trying to create this report so we can get back on schedule. Another project is yellow, that's trending up, is our hiring staff for fiscal year 13 and 14. An aggressive recruitment plan has been placed and to fill these vacant positions. To date, we have 50 of the 106 positions authorized fiscal years have been filled. And again, 11 pending start dates. The authority has received an increase of 106.5 positions this year, increasing our total number of authorized positions from 68.5 to 175. The effective dates were staggered, ranging from August of 2013 through January of 2014. The authority has been undergoing a diligent recruitment plan in order to fill the majority of these positions before the end of the current fiscal year. A significant challenge to filling these vacancies was due to classification requirements, development of examinations because there was no prior existing examination available for the authority's use. The examination development process typically takes about 4 months and requires a time commitment from subject matter experts, from the authority and other departments who have staff that are available to assist. The authority is in the process of transitioning the HR Personnel Services contract from DGS to Caltrans. This will streamline the duty statement approval process, given that many of these classifications are utilized and exist at Caltrans. This will apply to any positions that are authorized in future fiscal years. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Paul Rivera, our Chief Auditor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fong. Ms. Rivera.
Hi, I'm Paula Rivera. I'm with Internal Audits for the authority, and as of this time last week, I was the only auditor. But we are also diligently working on hiring, and we will have 4 staff by the end of next month. The audit office is an independent function within the authority. We report functionally to the board. We provide independent evaluation and consultation services, which are apart from those audits that are done by external audit agencies or other control agencies. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we develop the audit plan. The first thing we do is we solicit audit topics from executive management. We look at issues that have been identified in our prior internal audits or audits performed by external agencies. And then there's an internal risk assessment that's performed every 2 years. It's called FISMA, the Financial Integrity State Manager Accountability Act, that I'll get to a little later when we get to the audit plan. But it is a risk assessment that's done by management. So we look at those topics. We kind of give them a preliminary audit scope and identify what the resources could be to perform those audits. Then we put them into a priority, those that are required by law. If we have any specific requests by the CEO or by the board, and then the remaining topics, we assess their relative risk to the authority. Okay, slide 23. I'll get into a little bit of our audit plan. The first item that's listed on the audit plan is the Small Business Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Reporting Program. This assignment is currently in progress. The scope was to evaluate the Small Business Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program reporting and to test the accuracy of the data reported as we make our progress towards the 30% goal that was established. Our focus was on the small business program processes. We identified what the authority is doing to attain the small business goals, and we looked at the small business program guidelines. The next item on the audit plan is compliance with the Public Records Act. I know the audit plan says it's on hold, but please don't think that compliance is on hold. It's just our audit of the process. It will be a review to evaluate the process of responding to Public Records Act requests, which we call PRA. We'll determine whether the authority complies with PRA response requirements and levies appropriate fees for the requests. It's on hold as we finalize some of our policies and processes, primarily related to the levies of fees for reimbursement. The next item on the audit plan is draft agreement reviews. That's something that's an ongoing activity in the audit office. The scope of those is to review draft contracts before they're executed for the applicable fiscal provisions. And those, we look at the method of payment to see, is it actual cost, firm fixed price, specified hourly rates, task orders. Then we look at whether or not there's an adequate record retention policy, whether it complies with the federal guidelines, complies with our grant. We look to see that the contract includes a right to audit for federal funding authorities, the Bureau of State Audits, as well as the authority. We look to see that there's a termination for convenience clause as required by the federal requirements. We look to see that the appropriate cost principles, the federal cost principles, are included in the agreements. We look to see that there is a defined term of the agreements, not necessarily a start date and end date, but a start date and possibly a a 3-year period or a number of days from a notice to proceed. If there is any equipment that's included in the contract, we look to see that there are the applicable equipment provisions, how you track it, how you tag it, what happens with your reporting, what happens at the end of the contract, those sort of things. And then the last provision that the audit office looks at is that there's a subcontracting provision, and that the provisions that are relative to subcontracts have a requirement that they'll be in all the subcontracts. Then we read the scope to see if it's an auditable scope, looking to see when we come back in a few years, will we be able to see defined deliverables and defined due dates and be sure that the contract was complied with. And then the last thing I do for this type of assignment is I look at the cost proposal and I compare it to the method of payment. If it's an actual cost contract, I look to see that there are actual costs in the cost proposal, and that the costs appear reasonable for the type of work that's being proposed. The next assignment on the audit plan is what we call pre-negotiation reviews for architectural and engineering contracts. When there is a request for proposal where quality is the primary driver as opposed to cost, those cost proposals come to the audit office and we take a look at the cost proposal primarily. We read the contract for those provisions I discussed a moment ago, but we look at the cost proposal when we compare the pay rates to actual payroll data. We look at the overhead that is proposed and compare that to the most recent overhead schedule. And then we're looking at any other direct costs that have been proposed. Travel is in accordance with state travel guidelines, those sort of other direct costs. We look to see that there is a basis for the estimate and that they'll only be reimbursed for actual costs incurred. The current workload for that is there were 3 regional consultant contracts that we've performed these reviews for. We have an additional 5 right-of-way engineering and surveying contracts that are in process right now, and there will be an additional pre-negotiation review in the spring for the project and construction management contract. The next item on my audit plan is FSMA, and that's the Financial Integrity State Managers Accountability Act, and it's Government Code 13400, and it requires a report every other year.
Your conference contains less than 3 participants at this time. If you would like to continue, press star 1 now, or the conference will be terminated. Can we do that, please? I'm sorry, Ms. Rivera.
No worries.
That's not part of the
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. What is required is every other year, the head of each agency reports on the internal control, administrative and accounting and internal controls of their entity. And consistent.
Your conference contains less than 3 participants at this time. If you would like to continue, press star 1 now, or the conference will be terminated.
Okay. So the Department of Finance has issued some guidance on how entities are to comply with FSMA. And management is to do an internal risk assessment. They're to look at the administrative and accounting risks of the entity. And our role is the audit office, but my role in particular this year was to facilitate that process, to introduce the FSMA to management. We requested that management identify risks. We met with them individually to refine those. Sometimes we had a list of topics and we had some additional detail. We took those risks that were identified by executive management and categorized them. We went back to management, and management ranked the risks for impact and probability. For those risks that were high impact, high probability, the audit office documented the controls that we have in place and documented the corrective action plan that the authority has developed in order to mitigate those risks going forward. The next audit on the audit plan is grant management. As Russell mentioned, we have 4 different federal grants, and so this audit will be to assess the authority's compliance with the grant provisions. We want to be sure that nothing is, that it's not duplicated or lost. So we're going to look at the overall grant provisions, identify what's required, who's responsible, and document that it's being performed. So those 6 assignments are what we expect to be able to do this fiscal year with our current staff. Should we be able to staff up, we'll move on to the second half of the audit plan. This progress report audits, it's one that was requested by the board when the Bureau of State Audits report came out in 2012. It's to test the compliance of the progress reports and invoices with the annual work programs for the regional consultant contracts and the project management team. We're going to evaluate the percentage of completion of the tasks in comparison to the amount that's been invoiced. All of the primes are going to be reviewed, and we're going to look at two progress reports for each prime each year. However, I'd like to note that this assignment is on hold because as the project management oversight has been migrated to the authority and we have state staff fulfilling this, the process has changed a little bit. We don't want to go into an old process and say what's wrong with something that's no longer in place. So this is on hold. We hope the process will be implemented in March of this year, so next month. The next category of audits that we could perform will be construction-related audits. These will be timed to coincide with construction activities. The types of things we could look at are incurred cost audits, looking at the costs that have been reimbursed by the authority, as well as the internal controls related to the incurred cost process, charging practices, invoicing processes, those sort of things. Those audits would be to assure that only federally eligible costs are reimbursed by the Federal Railroad Administration. We could also take a look at change orders, verify the accuracy of the costs in those negotiated contract changes, as well as the application of overhead and adherence to the process. Another type of audit we could do is the invoicing process. There's a very short time frame, 45 days to comply with the Prompt Payment Act, and so we could go in and verify that the invoices process is adhering to the established process from the time the invoice is received all the way through FRA reimbursement. Another type of audit that we can do is post-contract audits or incurred cost audits. It doesn't have to be completely when the contract's over. We would look at the reasonableness and allowability of the costs reimbursed under the contract. We would assess the effectiveness and the efficiency of those contracted resources. The procedures that we would perform would include interviews of authority and consultant staff. Of course, obtaining technical expertise is necessary because I'm not an engineer, nor do I plan to be. We would perform an analysis of the value received for the work that was performed and take a look at the reasonableness and the allowability of the reimbursed costs. As there are a number of contracts, you can see from Russ's list, the contracts would be selected based on risk factors. The risk factors could be dollar value, the number of contracts for a particular firm, and any management requests. Another ongoing workload is audit liaison. As external entities come to audit the authority, Federal Railroad, Bureau of State Audits, GAO, our office provides a liaison to those auditors. We put the the auditors in contact with the right people in the authority. We are in the loop with all the requests, so we know what's been requested, and we look to see that those requests are being fulfilled in a timely manner. And if we also take a look at the responses that have been provided, and if it's a narrow response that doesn't completely answer the auditor's question, we'll direct the auditors to different personnel or a brighter perspective, so that they can be efficient in their audits of the authority. And currently, we have one audit in progress, the Bureau of State Audits, and they're performing the federal compliance portion of the single audit, which most likely is an annual event. The next type of audit we'll perform, and this is a general category, is effectiveness and efficiency performance reviews. These will be determined based on FSMA. So we look at the risk assessment, we look at the types of things that were identified, and then we look to see where we could perform an audit to assist with the effectiveness and efficiency. This will be very important as we're creating new processes as we get into construction package 1 and construction packages 2, 3. These are new processes, and that's where generally there's a lot of risk. The last item on the audit plan is a year-end close review. We're going to look at the year-end close processes and to determine that those processes were adequate to ensure there were no material misstatements. DGS, Department of General Services, was our contracted accountants up through the end of through December, but for last fiscal year. So we'd like to take a look to see that their year-end close process was adequate. That's all I have. I'd like to introduce Scott Jarvis, Program Management.
Thank you, Paula. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the board members. My name is Scott Jarvis. I'm the Assistant Chief Program Manager. And I'd like to briefly introduce the monthly status report that we have for Construction Package 1, CP1. It is a high-level summary report that provides the overall status of CP1. And the prosecution of the project is in the early stages, and so the report reflects that information. The report will continue to be used to communicate the status of the project as we move forward. And to just give you a little bit of idea of the report, and it's in the packages, it includes the status of 10 areas of CP1. The management team, schedule milestones, contract time, financial, change orders, time and dollars expended as a percentage of the original budget, time and dollar growth as a percentage over the original budget, major scheduled activities over the next 6 months, key topics, and key work accomplished during the reporting period. So now I'll go ahead and touch on a few of those status reporting areas. Schedule. No time extensions have been approved to date, and the contractor is scheduled to finish within the number of contract working days, which places the completion of the project on or before January 31st, 2018. Financial. 3 invoices have been approved, totaling $38.6 million. Change orders. 5 change orders are pending. To date, no deductions have been made from the original contract contingency. Time and dollars expended. 6.2% of the contract time has been expended, with 3.8% of the work performed. And these figures are consistent with a large design-build project in its early stages. Time and cost growth. No time growth has occurred from the number of original contract working days, and no cost growth has occurred to the original contract allotment. Major scheduled activities during the next 6 months: obtaining permits, construction demolition, finalizing parts of the baseline design report, engineering and field work for utility relocation, and design engineering up to 60% on some of the project structures. Key topics: Right-of-way acquisition and approval of third-party agreements continue to be critical activities that the authority is focusing on. And key field work accomplished. For the period through January 20th, 2014, the contractor performed geotechnical drilling and testing, and this work continues. And now I'd like to go ahead and introduce the authority's risk manager, John Tapping.
Thank you, Mr. Jarvis.
Good morning, Chairman Richard, fellow board members. It's my pleasure to be here before you again to talk about my favorite subject, risk management. My name is John Tapping. I'm the risk manager for the authority. And my role on the Finance and Audit Committee is basically to report trending information on risks program-wide to the Finance and Audit Committee. It's been a really exciting year with respect to risk management implementation. I think if you read the draft business plan, you can see the independent infusing of risk management processes into some of the highly technical modeling that's been done. Our team has looked at the ridership revenue, operating and maintenance, as well as life cycle models, and applied a quantitative risk approach to it. In essence, applying Monte Carlo simulations, looking at a possible range of outcomes. And so we've really, in essence, come in as an independent review using risk management techniques to validate the assumptions and the modeling that's been done on the earlier models. So it's been really exciting to see risk management integrated into the program as a whole, and I want to thank the board and the Finance and Audit Committee actually for being a champion for risk management techniques and bringing that in. So that was a great accomplishment. The other accomplishment, I believe, early as I started was I wanted to implement a strategy of a risk-informed contingency approach in putting into our program and our contracts. And so one of the things that I report to the Finance and Audit Committee is the trending information associated with contingencies that have been approved by the board. And so today I just wanted to run through briefly some primary risk drivers on the CP1 contract, kind of piggyback on what Scott presents as the status, and then I go further and I talk about some of the risk drivers and the trending of the risks as we go through it. Mr. Ross, you spoke about the migration of risk, and it's very important to realize that you don't just look at risk once in a project. It's continuous. We update our risk registers on a monthly basis, and we do quantitative approaches as necessary to develop these trends. And so what we did early on was do a risk-informed approach in looking at the contingency that was prudent for the CP1 contract. And we came before you earlier, and you approved that contingency. And so we really have a baseline contingency with identified risks and uncertainties that the modeling actually resulted in that recommendation. So we compare as we go forward, as the risk migrate, so to speak, or we implement risk responses, we can update that modeling. And so what we will be doing in the next several months is updating the quantitative approach, and from there we can do a confidence level in meeting our contingency and how it's trending, how our contingency is trending. We can also look at how our risk responses have affected our contingency or reduced our risk. So I'm going to talk just briefly about 5 risk drivers that we identified early. Again, they were assessed for uncertainty, they were a cost risk, and were the basis for the risk-informed contingency that was approved on the CP1 contract. The first risk driver, the primary risk drivers, again, there are dozens of risks in our risk register that went into the modeling, but we found that these were the primary risk drivers that drove the contingency recommendation. Right-of-way acquisition. Again, there continues to be a very aggressive right-of-way schedule in our contract, and there is some pressure to that schedule. We've taken a number of risk mitigations in that approach. We've identified critical path parcels. So we have a systematic, disciplined approach to procuring the right-of-way. We've augmented staff and a litany of other risk responses to address that. The trend information as compared to our baseline on the CP1 contingency analysis is unchanged at this point in time. In March, we anticipate incorporating actual parcel acquisition with the contractors, the design builders' schedule, and from there we can do a quantitative approach and update, basically measure how we're doing against the trend analysis for that particular risk. Our second risk driver was having to do with relocation of utilities. There are some new requirements requiring Buy America on certain utilities of relocation. And the market and the materials market, there was a ramp-up period that's going to be necessary. So there's some uncertainty there as far as the processing going forward. We've aggressively been working together with the utility companies, with FRA and PG&E and AT&T, and the design builder to advance the engineering, which will determine the relocation requirements and materials lists. So it's anticipated in the June of 2004 that we'll have a better handle on the sensitivity of the schedule impacts that may be related to that process in obtaining Buy America approval for the materials and the procurement. The third primary risk driver has a number of issues, sub-risk drivers, and that's the adjacency of the railroads and working with the railroads and the railroad agreements that are underway. We have several agreements in place. There are still some agreements pending. Some of the uncertainty involved in this process involves the review process by the railroad agencies and the period of time they would like in the review processes. And so we're meeting with the railroads in a partnering manner to come to some agreement on review times that we can quantify to a larger extent. A secondary subcategory with that is potential additional intrusion protection between the two facilities. At this point, the parties are discussing design guidelines. There's a difference of opinion regarding the design guidelines, and we're working through that. But that has some, again, that was identified early. We have some amount in the contingency to cover that. And I believe they're working towards a mutual agreeable resolution. And again, the trending on that one is no change at this point. Once the preferred design criteria is received from UPRR in the next few months, we anticipate being able to quantify that in a lot greater detail. And again, we can run the Monte Carlo and get some better trending on that. Another subcategory to a railroad risk is there's a spur and the associated with the San Joaquin Valley Railroad and the operations surrounding it and the interface with our design build contractor. Again, identified early, agreements were not in place, so we included some contingency uncertainty in our earlier assessments. Since that time, we've met with the design builder, we've met with the railroad, and we've managed to get a lot greater detail on the amount of time and effect that the two operations may impact each other. And so I would say that risk is trending positive. It's actually, we'll be able to quantify it in April, but that one is trending positive. The last two are grouped together. They're subsurface conditions and class 1 and 2 hazardous waste. Again, there's some contingency in there for uncertainty because at going into a design build contract, there's a number of borings that the owner has done, but there will be a lot more as we go forward, and we'll have to reassess that upon borings. I should note, however, that the design builder is well underway in his boring program, and work has started. 83 of 460 borings have been completed. That's approximately 20%. and there's no indication yet of differing site conditions. However, it's still early, and we still, at this point, I would recommend no change to that trend as we earlier identified. I would say in the middle of June, we should have a real better feel for potential differing site conditions. There's a contractual requirement that a geotechnical design baseline report be prepared by the design builder, and that will give us a better indication we'll be able to quantify. So with that, I'll summarize by saying, it's really exciting to actually to follow all of this stuff through and be able to, I think these are really, as Mike Rossi said, these are early, I won't say early warning, but they're triggers that could identify an early warning. And as long as we continue to manage them, both qualitatively, as I have here today, and quantitatively, as we will in the next 3 months, we'll be able to manage those and move forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Tapping. And just to clarify, those 5 that you went through were just illustrative of the risks from the risk register that you're on top of. I didn't want people to think that somehow those are the totality of the risks that the project's facing at this point.
The brief answer is yes. The one other sentence answer is, yeah, we have hundreds of risks in our risk register. What we do is we run them all through a Monte Carlo analysis, and we come up with a sensitivity analysis that shows you the most critical risks. And those 6 primary risk drivers are pretty much drive, at this point, the contingency. And to this date, we have not identified any other risks that rise to that level. And certainly if they do, we're delighted at the Finance and Audit Committee and for this board.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's it, Mr. Chairman. So that completes the presentations.
I have a question.
Ms. Perez-Estelano.
I just have one quick question to Russ.
Yes.
Thank you. I just want a little bit of maybe explanation or update, really, on where we are with paying out, and I'll try and find it. It's I found it difficult to follow on the PowerPoint just because my eyesight isn't as good as Mike Rossi's, and he was saying, "Why are you having a problem?" But essentially, it's on the where is it? It's the one where we.
Are you talking about the payables?
Yes, thank you.
I think that's right at the beginning.
Yeah, it's
so
the first and second page.
So, Russ, if you could help us understand.
Sure.
How we're clearing out those account payables, that'd be great,
Yeah.
particularly for small businesses who I know having a 120-day payable rate or even longer. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, this is probably our most sensitive report. This is our age payable report, and what this tracks, again, are any invoices that are over 45 days. So again, 1 through 30 is 46 days plus. What you're looking at on top is a rollout of how many receivables are aged by those categories. And if you look at the total, it's about $47 million on the top part. Some of the challenges we faced, as I mentioned earlier, and some other issues are, in January, we had the federal shutdown, which means we could not submit any requests for drawdowns. Right after they came back, I think about a week later, Delphi, which is their federal drawdown system, went down for 2 weeks for maintenance. On top of that, in December, we transitioned from DGS to high-speed rail, all our financial functions, so there was about a 3.5-week delay. In other words, we couldn't submit any invoices because DGS had to close the year out. So those are some of the administrative occurs that got the balance up to about 47. It was actually a lot higher. We have drawn that down. But what I really would like to point out is the bottom section of the report. And what the bottom section reports, at that time, it looks like it's about $42 million. As of yesterday, we currently have $63 million pending FRA approval. And what that means is if FRA were to approve all our requests tomorrow, we would begin the process of transferring the funds to the State Controller's Office and paying checks, which would get our balance to the bottom right-hand corner. I believe it's about $4.7 million. Part of that $4.7 million, I believe it's about $3 million, is also being disputed. So it's really, really what I consider a low amount. But in all fairness, we've had some challenges over the last 6 months. There was a process because we used to pay our bills with Prop 1A bond fund cash first. Last year, we worked with the FRA and went with what we call a tapered match. In other words, we're using federal funds first, and then at a later date, we'll reimburse with cash from the state side at a later date. The process works, and the funding's good. FRA is really stepped up to the plate. The problem is it takes about 30 days to 40 days, 50 days to actually get those drawdowns approved. So that's slowed up the process a little bit. Again, I think we're catching up. If the FRA does approve this last drawdown request of about $63 million, you'll see we'll be pretty much caught up. So I feel good going forward, but we have had some challenges over the last 6 months.
I've heard as much from small businesses, so that's the reason why I want to bring it up. I want to be good. I want to be a good company to work with. I mean, I want our organization to be an entity that, small businesses say, yeah, that's a group that we can work with. So I'm just sensitive to that, and I know you're working really hard to kind of zero out those outstanding payments. So
right. It is our top priority.
Thank you.
Mr. Umberg.
And this seems to be a chronic problem. We've heard this for 3 years, long before your tenure here. And maybe we've adopted a policy, I don't recall, with respect to payment. And if we haven't, we should. I realize that whatever policy we might enact is contingent upon, for example, the FRA or others approving the expenditure of funds. But to carry on with Ms. Perez-Estolano's comments, our failure to pay or our delay in payment precludes small businesses from really participating. If you're a small business and you've got a payroll and we're 121 days or even worse than that, almost 365 days in some cases, you're out of business. So as a suggestion, to the extent that we can research and enact a policy with respect to payment, I understand Caltrans has some such thing, I would suggest that we look into that.
Yeah, I'm looking for Mr. Morales, who I think is stepped down, ready to go. He's in the on-deck circle for the next presentation, but I think that is something that we should explore. And I would just add that as a person who was a co-owner of a small business for 15 years, who remembers many nights lying in bed at night wondering how the hell we were going to keep things going, and floating our own checks to the owners so that we can keep paying our employees. I'm particularly sensitive to what this means for small businesses. So, I don't know, Jeff, if you want to address this now, or if you want to just get back to us with some thoughts on Mr. Umberg's suggestion.
Jeff, do you mind if we could just address this, because it is a real issue, and if we could just kind of put that out there, Russ, with just an update, because I know of small businesses that have used lines of credits, have exhausted those things to try and kind of hold over until they get payment. And so I just want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can. It sounds like we are. So maybe, Dan, if that's something like looking into the Caltrans option, if there's
reporting
something.
Back to us on that.
Correct. I would appreciate that.
Let me just say we're acutely aware of the challenge facing all of our contractors. No one, no matter how big you are, you don't like to carry a balance on your books for very long. It's especially important to small businesses. We get that, and we, in many cases, we've worked with our primes and with our small businesses where possible to try to help relieve some of the pressure on the small businesses in order to keep work going. In the meantime, we need to deal with it systematically and solve it once and for all. We're on the verge of doing that now. I accept that this has been an ongoing problem, but I think, and we have some differences from Caltrans, for instance. They have multiple sources of money coming in, different ways to pay contractors and then make their accounts balance up. We're limited in the source of funds that we have coming in, so it limits some of our flexibility in that area. But with the processes that we've put in place now with the FRA and with clearing out these, it should be a much cleaner situation going forward. And so, and we're, again, as Russ said, we've got $63 million in invoices pending there. So by the time we issue this next report to the board, we should see a very dramatically improved situation that then we're committed to maintaining as we go forward. But we'll certainly come back and present whatever policies would make sense, whatever we can do process-wise to codify those efforts, we'll certainly do that.
All right. At this point, before we move to Mr. Morales, and I did have some closing comments I wanted to make, but our reporter needs a break. Probably a number of us need a break. So why don't we take a break for 10 minutes? I'm going to enforce 10 minutes, and we'll come right back. So thank you.
Only the old people. Only the old guys. you hammer that thing? Let's go. Are you in charge or what?
Be back in order. Before we turn to the last item on the agenda, I just want to make a few comments on the report from the Finance and Audit Committee, and I'll keep them brief, but I do think it's noteworthy that this is a milestone for this project, in my opinion. And it may not seem that way to everybody, but what we're endeavoring to deliver here is the largest infrastructure project in the United States. And to do that, we need to have an organization that can deliver that project. And I will tell you that at times in the past, when we were going through the legislative appropriation process in 2012 and so forth, and all the attention was focused on the business plan, some of us, I know Mr. Rossi and I had these conversations, were very concerned about whether or not we had an organization that could actually deliver the project that the legislature approved. And at that time, I think that was quite questionable. Today, I think it's very clear that we do. That's a testament to our CEO, Mr. Morales, and the people that he has brought in. It's a testament, frankly, to the board, and I think we're fortunate to have people of the experience that Mr. Rossi has and Tom Richards has, both in finance and in construction. So we've been able to create through Finance and Audit Committee these systems. And I think as we sit here today, we have the most sophisticated risk management program of any major infrastructure project in the country, certainly any that we're aware of. I think that what we saw today is the creation of financial reporting, budget and program management, and risk management tools that are going to be very important for this board as it discharges its governance responsibilities, but also to our colleagues in the legislature, the Department of Finance, the administration, and the public at large in having insight into this program as it moves forward. And as we're now on the verge of moving into the construction phase of the project, it's going to be especially important. And the last thing I want to say about this is that I hope that all of us, both on this board, in the legislature, in the public, in the press, are capable and mature enough of understanding that projects like this are going to have negative occurrences. We just had a colloquy just before the break about an issue that's of great significance to many of the people who work on this project, and that is the aging of accounts payable, where the news was not great, but is getting better. There are going to be things like that as we move forward with this project. There are going to be bumps in the road. There are going to be things that are starting to trend in the wrong direction. The measure of how we do as an organization is not whether or not we can avoid those things, because no human endeavor can avoid those things. The measure of how we do as an organization is how we identify them and how we respond to them. And that's what this was all about. And so I, again, want to thank Mr. Rossi and Mr. Richards for their work in Finance and Audit Committee in getting to this point so that we now have an ongoing stream of tools for oversight and governance. And I want to thank our staff, starting with our CEO, but all of the folks that you heard present to you today, representing our CFO organization, our auditing function, our risk management function, our program management function. These are going to be really critical things. They're under the hood. They're not the big flashy things that people like to talk and write about, who's suing whom and what's happening in Congress and all of that. But it's the under the hood stuff that's going to determine our success in actually building America's first high-speed rail system. So that's why I wanted to just take a moment and take note of it, because I think it actually is a very significant milestone for this organization to be moving into an area where we can build this program and we can have the controls to make sure that we're doing it right. So with that, I thank my colleagues and thank the staff. We'll move now to the presentation of the draft 2014 business plan. Mr. Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will only take an hour or so. I'm going to present to the board and to the public the draft business. You
know what a quorum
is. Good news is this is not an action item. So, we released the draft business plan. What I'm going to do today is describe summarize its contents and the process that we'll go through as we go forward with it. First, it was noted by some of the commenters that the 2014 draft is different in some ways than the 2012. That is absolutely true. One of the reasons for that is that the 2012 plan, as you will recall, was serving multiple purposes as the legislature was considering an appropriation, and it was as a new team was coming on and laying out a new direction. This plan is not laying out a new direction. It is building on the direction that was provided in 2012, and it is very specifically tied to and addresses the statutory requirements of the authority in terms of what needs to be in a business plan and what the legislature will be reviewing and looking at. The plan was released last Friday. And that starts a statutorily required 60-day public comment period, and we'll talk more about the comments and how we'll be taking those comments and working with them. But it really, again, this plan is more of an update than the last plan, building on both the basic plan and the business model that was laid out, but providing updates of ridership, O&M, and cost estimates. One important note I want to stress, throughout this business plan, it is informed by expert external inputs. We have gone out, in some cases, at the request of the legislature and then also at the initiative of the board and of staff, and really gone out to obtain the best thinking in the world about how to move forward with this program. And so we have gotten that input from all over the country and even all over the world, and you'll see that reflected in the product in this plan. Now, just to walk through the sections of the plan quickly. First section is, and we're really reminding people what this program is about, and it's about connecting California, connecting Californians, and going through the progress, and I think the key point here is progress. The progress that we've made on the program and on key milestones. Also the progress that we have made in terms of improving our processes that develop and lead to the cost estimates, the fare box revenue, the demand modeling, and the economic analyses. Significant improvements in all of those, again, informed by expert external input. Section 2 of the draft plan. Again, it builds on and is consistent with what was laid out in 2012 in terms of the basic nature of how we're going to do this, with assigning risk to those who can manage it best and bringing in the private sector into the program as a key partner in delivering it. I do want to note we are, in many ways, although we always think of private sector involvement when it comes to equity, key elements of that are starting already also with private sector involvement through the design-build process, where we gain the expertise of the private sector and their initiative. So it really is not just about when we ultimately bring on a concessionaire, but it is starting already. Section 3 deals with capital and life cycle costs, and it's worth noting that the capital costs, the projected costs for the system, the $68 billion, are essentially unchanged. They're actually down slightly, but that's due to the forecasting. There was some question raised about why we include phase 1, and the reason is very simple. That's specifically what the legislation calls for. It directs us to provide in the business plan the phase 1 costs, and that's what we're doing. So that's specifically responsive to that. In the cost estimates, and in particularly the life cycle cost estimates, which are looking out over 30, 40, 50 years of operation of the program and what the costs are on an ongoing basis, we start to see introduced the Monte Carlo analysis that John Tapping spoke to earlier, where we do multiple simulations of costs and variations to really help us improve the reliability of our forecasts. With regard to the demand modeling and the fare box revenue estimates, again, we've utilized not just point estimates, but Monte Carlo analyses throughout to look at different permutations, test the sensitivity, and ultimately the reliability of these estimates, the comfort level that we can have. This is an element that was not in the previous plan. It's not in most plans for any program. It's an additional step. It's really, again, where we're on the leading edge of managing this program. And so we were able to say that not only can we project that we will be able to break even ultimately in the financial analysis, but we can also say what our level of confidence is in those forecasts. So it really is providing the public and decision makers with a much enhanced tool to be able to evaluate the program. In terms of the summary, the ridership levels are up from the last plan. The revenues are down slightly, and the reason for that is the new inputs into the model, which are, it's not modeling, it's actual data based on surveys showing that, in fact, there's been a higher growth in shorter trips within the state, faster growth than long trips. And in our modeling, shorter trips produce lower revenues, so if we have a disproportionate growth in shorter trips, that tends to drop our overall revenues. And so that's why you see that difference. But I do want to point out we're still well within the bounds and are able to recover fully the cost and have net positive cash flow in spite of that. And it's also important to note, nowhere in this plan do we optimize these results. And by that I mean on the factor that I just talked about, where we would see a higher growth in short-haul trips. When we get closer to operation, and certainly as a private operator would look at that, the operator wouldn't accept that as an outcome and would look to either potentially use pricing or other mechanisms to get more revenue out of those short trips, or potentially discourage shorter trips on the system, because a short trip also means someone who's going a long distance may not be able to get a seat. Nowhere in this plan do we optimize for those sorts of things yet. That's something we'll do in subsequent plans. It's something that the peer review group has talked to us about the need to do as we get closer to operation. All of that, though, will again improve the financial performance of the system from where we are today. Operations and maintenance, again, we've had extensive input from all around the world. We just most recently had representatives from multiple countries and multiple systems here in San Francisco meeting with us and doing workshops to look at all of our calculations and how we are looking at operations and maintenance, so that we can really make sure that we're factoring in how a high-speed rail system works, because obviously we don't have that sort of system here in the U.S., and so we need to make sure that we're looking at external models to get that. We see associated with that higher ridership that I talked about, higher ridership means more trains running. So we see an increase in O&M and operations and maintenance there. We also see some upfront changes in the O&M costs due to some higher fixed costs than we assumed in the plan in 2012, and that's detailed in the draft plan. The key to the financial analysis, again, really is it's tying together the different forecasts, the forecast of the demand modeling, of the revenues, and then the O&M, putting those together and saying, does the system work? And the answer is yes, it does. It continues to show that the system is viable, and the Monte Carlo analysis shows that we can be very confident in those results by running some 5,000 variations of the different outcomes. That produces then a level of certainty that is extremely high, that when we say we will hit the break-even cost of this, meaning that we will not require a subsidy, a key component of Prop 1A, we can say that with as close to 100% certainty as I think anybody could get. It is still a forecast, obviously, but by utilizing these tools, we're able to provide a much higher degree of assurance of what that outcome will be. Economic impact, again, no significant change from what was in the 2012 plan in terms of the benefits that the state will receive. And here we used an extensively reviewed process for determining benefits and costs based and had a significant input from the Government Accountability Office, the federal office that looked at this program, and in fact it concluded that what we were doing is again at the leading edge industry practice. And the benefit cost ratio, for those who are familiar with those, the basic thing is you need a benefit cost ratio typically of at least 1.0, meaning you're receiving as much benefit as it's costing you. For the program to be viable, we have a benefit cost ratio of over 2 for each phase of the program. So again, you see significant benefits coming in the form of job creation and other factors. Management, and just to follow on the comments that Chairman Richard made, this really underscores again, we are on the leading edge of risk management in terms of applying it to a program. We've worked very closely with academics and industry professionals around the world. Mr. Flyberg or Fluberg, however, Mr. Rossi, you may correct me on the pronunciation, who's one of the leading experts on this and widely cited out of Oxford in England. We've been working with his people to look at their findings and incorporate them into our program. And really use risk management as not just a way of identifying risks, but managing those risks and injecting that into our program. And providing that transparency, some of which I think, again, was shown in the previous presentation of making sure that this board and the public and others can understand what challenges we face and how we are managing them. Now, as far as moving forward with the comments, we have multiple ways to receive public comment. If you go on the website, it provides all these points of contact. People can submit. There's a comment form on the website that's very user-friendly to provide. We can also take them in writing, over the phone, and in the public comment periods at the board meetings. Each and every comment that is received will be reviewed. Each and every comment will be made available to the board for their review. When there was discussion in the memo and there was a question about what it will mean for staff to summarize for the board, what that will be is really sorting comments in order for the board to look at them and understand, for instance, that we got 72% of the comments were relating to one particular area of the report. So it's really about the analysis of the comments so that the board can understand where the focus has been. But the full comments will be made available to the board so that they can consider them. Where we go from here, so the plan is now out for that 60-day public comment period. We have already received some comments. I think we got the first half dozen or so over the weekend. And we'll continue to take them in on a rolling basis and analyze them, look at them, and recommend changes where we think it's appropriate to do so. The plan is that at the April 10th board meeting, we would come back to the board with a proposal with recommended changes and hear from the board its comments about what needs to be changed in order to adopt then a final 2014 business plan, and then submit that to the legislature as required on May 1st on schedule.
Thank you. That was a very nice summary. I appreciate it. Questions or comments from the board?
I
Ms.
just have one
Perez-Estelano.
question. Jeff, what is the process in terms of outreach, just getting this information that the updated plan is available for comment, for review? Are we sending it out to like transportation agencies, the planning, MPOs? How are we doing that? Or I'm not sure if we have a responsibility, but I think we have a duty certainly to try and get that out.
We have various ways of doing it. One is we issued a press release when we put it out. We put it up. It's on the very front page of our website, prominently displayed, certainly, so when anyone goes to the website, they'll see it right there. We do work directly with our stakeholders to make them aware of it and invite their comment. We're doing that also through our regional directors, taking responsibility for dealing directly with the people within their areas. We expect we'll get we did certainly the last time, got significant number of comments from around the state and would expect the same this time.
Other questions, Mr. Rossi?
Jeff, a early speaker talked about this disappearance of a number from the plan. Would you like to explain what that was all about?
Sure. Well, again, I think the last plan was serving a number of different purposes in terms of really baselining where the project was, staking out what the options were going forward, and so had things that weren't required in the plan, and that really, as we move forward, I would just say are not relevant in that it's putting out some hypotheticals that have no real basis in reality. So what we are putting forward now in the estimate is our estimate, which is our best assessment of what the costs are, both on a current year basis and then on a projected basis. We take that estimate and stress test it, subject it to variations up and down, looking at different factors. But there is an estimate. There really is no such thing as a high or a low estimate. There's an estimate and then variations off of it. So what's presented is what's called for by the legislature, which is on that particular matter, the estimate of what the program cost is.
And it is an estimate, as you say, that has been tested from the perspective of the necessary contingencies for the inherent risk on a probability basis through the Monte Carlo examination of over thousands of iterations.
Yes, and as a general point, I think it goes back to the last presentation also, and Mr. Chairman, some comments you made. I know we have, we have people who feel very strongly about this program, some who will support it no matter what, some who will oppose it no matter what. But I think when you look at the numbers here, and we are talking forecasts, so they are forecasts. They're not looking backward and testing, but we are doing, by every expert independent analysis, we are doing what is best practice on these. And so what we're putting forward are the best numbers that we can on these, our best analysis of what it is. People can disagree on a policy basis, but I think in terms of the numbers, the externals validation speaks loudly.
And also one other comment that I'd like to at least bracket. The $48 billion cost is not a YOE cost.
Right. There are many legacy issues we deal with.
We all sort of talk about the same facts.
Right. One of the challenges we are, and this is another area where this program is unique. I'm not sure I can think of another program anywhere that is required by law to put out a YOE projection, a year of expenditure projection of cost. I wonder sometimes if people had known the cost of the state highway system when it was first proposed, whether it would have ever started, or had known the cost of airports, in full, would they have supported, the bonds and things to support them. We're required to put out a YOE number. That's why we put it out. We start it in a base year. In this case, in this plan, we've updated to 2013 numbers and then project out based on our expectation of the pace of construction and the expenditure of dollars. That's how you get to the $67 billion over time. Previous estimates have used different, have been based on different assumptions and were based on different years. So you had 2008 numbers. It's not apples to apples to take a 2008 fixed cost number and compare that to a 2029 YOE number. Right. They're very different numbers. And so within and some of the assumptions, even the early projections of YOE the authority put out assumed a 2020 end date on things. So it makes it very challenging when, and when people talk about cost growth, it's not what it appears on the face. And one of the things we are going to look to do, I've talked to the chairman has talked to me about creating some common baseline of how to help people understand what those numbers are. They can reach their own conclusions about what those numbers mean, but at least make sure we're talking apples to apples to apples when we look at the different numbers.
Yeah, just on that point very quickly, and I know we all want to move on, but to reinforce what our CEO, Mr. Morales, just said about whether people would have blanched at the year of expenditure completion numbers, fully inflated numbers. But an example closer to home, if you go to the bank and you get a mortgage for your house for, say, $400,000, under the disclosure laws, you will find a paragraph that talks to you about what it is you will pay over the life of that 15 or 30-year mortgage. And for a $400,000 mortgage over 30 years, you'll pay, what, Mike, $750,000 or some.
Under a normal interest rate scenario.
Yeah.
This would not be a bad time.
Yeah, right. So most of us don't walk around and say, oh yeah, I got a $768,000 mortgage. You know, how much is the mortgage on your house? You don't say, well, it's $750,000. You say, I have a $400,000 mortgage on my house. Even though on a year of expenditure basis, fully inflated, you're paying this amount. So we have been victimized by this, and it's unfortunate. And I noted the reason I called Mr. Morales to talk about this was there was an article about the business plan in the Fresno Bee the other day. The person who wrote it is a very diligent reporter and was really trying to walk through what the evolution of project costs was, but at some point flipped over from the current year dollars to the year of expenditure dollars. We have not made it easy for people to crosswalk those numbers. And even in the comparison of first year dollars, people talk about the fact that, well, the Bond Act said that this was going to be $33 billion for the 520 miles, and now it's X. Well, as I went back and read the ballot argument, it said that in 2008, it said in 2006, it was estimated, which we presume was $2,006. And then you compare that to a current number that may be in $2,010, and now we update it in 2012 or $2,013. Well, those $2,006 would have inflated up to some number. So we've really gotten ourselves into a position, and I say we've gotten ourselves into a position because we've sort of allowed this to degenerate to where nobody can find a way to really compare. Has there been growth in the cost of this program? Absolutely. Has it been at the level that people are suggesting it has been? Absolutely not. So I think it would behoove us and be good for the public if we could come back in the spirit of the transparency that you saw this morning and just say, here is a way to make these dollars all comparable on a constant year basis. And then we can see, and then we can talk about what the cost drivers have been. And I'll just end with this. It's not like this program has been out of control and we haven't controlled the contractor. The growth in these costs has in large measure been because we're now seeing what the societal costs are of building something like this. So when we move the alignment to protect a community, when we move the alignment to protect businesses, we may be increasing costs. Those are the real costs that were always there. They just weren't recognized when people first drew lines on a map. And they reflect what it really takes to build this and protect other interests. So I'd rather have that conversation than get caught up in, is it 60 billion or is it 100 billion or whatever? Because let's talk as a society about what it takes to really build something like this, and then we can have that conversation. So I didn't mean to go on and on with this, but I haven't had breakfast and it's past lunch. So with that, any other questions from members of the board? Thank you, Mr. Morales. I thought that was a very good summary, and thanks to the staff for the work on the draft business plan. Thanks to my colleagues and to the public, and we're adjourned.
So are we doing the in conjunction with the business plan or the standalone meeting?